Good to see everybody. Revelation chapter 12 is where we're at. We're in the midpoint, really the last part of chapter 11 and chapter 12 is really the midpoint. So as we kind of get into this, we've been seeing this thing. We just saw the two witnesses that, of course, basically prophesied for about half of the tribulation period, and then God had protected them, and then God took down his shield of protection, hedge of protection around them, and Antichrist killed them, and they laid in the street for 3.5 days. I don't know if I got into this or not because I don't remember, but it's interesting that it wasn't 3 days but 3.5, and the significance of that is because it reflects the 3.5 years of the tribulation that they had been prophesying in. And then, of course, God resurrected them. Took them into heaven. They heard a voice out of heaven. The whole world did. So all this has went on. And then, of course, right after that, things just went kind of crazy with the world and stuff like that, because the world, by and large, was rejecting everything to do with Christ and with God. And so we saw the temple of God opened in verse 19. Now let's go to chapter 12, verse 1. Ladies, good to have you all with us. First time visitors, thank you for coming. Revelation to a lot of people is very confusing because it goes back and forth in time. That's what confuses everybody. Once you get that timeline right, it really starts coming together. Notice here in verse number 1, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown and 12 stars. Now, when we read that simply in English, we're like, is this, like a King movie, or maybe this come out of one of his books? Because you got, she's clothed with the sun, all these things. Well, all of this is just symbology. Remember, John was given this revelation 2,000 years ago on Isle of Patmos. John was a common man, a fisherman, called to be an apostle. He was the last living apostle. And so God gave him this great revelation. He's trying to interpret things with what's going on in his time period that is thousands of years in the future. Okay? So I want you to notice here, he's going to give some insight to the prophecies concerning the last half of the tribulation period. The first period is called the tribulation period. Okay? Tribulation, great trial, great testing. Then the second half, 3.5 years, is called great tribulation. The reason being, because the last part is going to be so much worse that it's going to be like comparing, here's a couple of grapes and here's a great cluster of grapes. It's just so much more. Matter of fact, if God didn't stay his hand, no humanity could have survived that last 3.5 years. By now, there's about 4 billion people dead on the earth, okay? And so, once again, we're in that parenthetical type season. What does that mean? That means that God is like, now you ladies, I know my mom used to watch stories and she would record them. And before she could record those things, you did not dare speak in our home while the stories were playing, because you could get beat, you could get sent out in the house. It didn't make any difference, snow a foot deep. She wanted to hear every word. When she got a recorder, she would play it, stop it, play it, stop it, play it. And I know some of those hour-long shows she probably watched for about 4 or 5 hours. So God has a pause button too. So what he's doing, he's pausing again between chapter 12, chapter 14. This is the third pause that he's made. And what he's doing, he's just catching us up with all the details. He's trying to give us better understanding. So that's what he's doing here. So between chapter 12, chapter 14, he's going to show us what this 7th trumpet blast is all about. The 7th trumpet, which is a warning, and its judgments, opens up the last series of judgment, which is the bowl judgments. Each one of these represents a type of judgment. So chapter 11, chapter 11 left us witnessing the tragedy of the two witnesses being killed, but then the triumph when the two witnesses were resurrected and all the world got to see God's great glory. Chapter 12 and 13, we're going to witness two terrible, terrible beasts. These are the fiercest beasts that we're going to find in Revelation. Now, we'll find in this time, and it's plural. I mean, it's singular. It says ands, with an apostrophe here. We're going to find 31 of them in these two chapters. These next two chapters. Each of these conjunctions are used when it says it gives you something, and it says ands. It's connecting another one. So it's just going to start connecting things. So we're going to have building blocks all the way through this. And basically what chapter 12 is, a summary of God's overall plan of salvation. When he calls out the church, the bride of Christ, in the rapture, the redeemed are taken out, the bride is home with Christ. God takes his attention off the Gentiles, which it's been ever since that he went back into heaven, okay? His resurrection. So all this time, this has been this Gentile age. And that's predominantly where the gospel, of course, drew at. It spread from. But then he's going to change his focus back to his chosen people, the Jewish people, Israel. So that's what we're going to start to see here. He's going back and he's kind of giving you a summary of his plan of salvation. And it outlines Satan's attack in detail. Matter of fact, we're going to find different names for him in this chapter 12. And we're going to see a woman and a man-child that comes forth. So notice the wonders in heaven, verse 1 here. It says, there appeared a great wonder, a singular wonder. At least that's how it starts. So in this chapter, we're going to get a sketch of history. So this is one of those times where he's turning and looking back. Okay, remember that. He looks back, he looks at the present, he looks at the future. And that's why Revelation confuses a lot of people. So in this outline, he's going to show us a lot of things. But notice here that in chapter 12, we run into issues of conflict. You say, what is that? Well, we're going to start to see it. The word wonder here, better translated, if you want to circle this in your Bibles or even in your notes, a better translation of that is sign. God is going to give us a sign. So he's given us a sign what? To show us something, to reveal something to us. So this wonder, when he says, and there appeared a great wonder, there appeared a sign in heaven. And what was that sign? A woman clothed with the sun, the moon, under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. So he said, okay, here's this first sign that I'm going to give you, and we're going to see this, and also down in verse number 3, and we're going to see this. So this sign is speaking of God declaring his truth to all of us. He's defining truth, okay? I'm going to try to really catch you up, help you to understand the events that are about to take place, but in doing so, I'm going to explain a little bit about the past. Great signifies a spiritual work that God is doing. So when he gives us, something that is great, when he says a great wonder, he's trying to emphasize that I'm going to reveal something that's a spiritual work that is taking place. If we were to say there's a great revival going over in Mountain City, a great revival, man, we'd be saying God is doing a special work there, okay? So that's what we're talking about. So the significance is this great wonder is going to appear in heaven. So God's will and purpose is going to be known through this sign, okay? So that's what he's doing. Now, I want you to notice great is a very descriptive word used 5 times here in this particular chapter. Verse 1, there's a great wonder. Verse 3, there's a great red dragon. Verse number 9, the great dragon was cast out. Verse number 12, having great wrath. And we'll get into these as we go. And verse 14, the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle. All these are symbolic. And that's why Revelation is hard to understand. So, notice what we're going to witness here. First of all, the devil's hatred for Israel. Let's go down to verse 2. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered, and there appeared another wonder. So here's going to be 2 wonders, okay, we talked about. There's going to be some wonders here in heaven. The first one, we've already described it here. He's given us a sign. And so this woman, being with a child and all the things that were descriptive there about the son, clothing her son, all that. So she goes on to say, there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. Notice where it appeared. The woman appeared in heaven. The great dragon appeared in heaven. And so it says, having 7 heads and 10 horns, 7 crowns upon head. Every bit of that is symbolic. Okay, so don't let that kind of get you distorted trying to think, what in the world is all this about? So beginning here in chapter 12 through chapter 14, we're going to witness 7 different people or personalities, you would say, that are going to be found here. We've already said in 1, we were seeing 2. The woman was the first of the 7 persons. Okay, it's introduced. Now, when we think about this, we automatically think about Mary. Well, she's appears in heaven and all these things. But we're going to see that later on, he's really talking about Israel. Okay? Because in real terms, Israel is the mother of God. Because Mary came out of Israel, the Jewish people. Okay? So it's easy to get some of these scriptures here and say, oh, well, she's great with child and the devil's trying to get the child and all that. Yeah, that reflects all the way back to, Mary and stuff like that. But the real connection here is symbolizes the nation of Israel. And this, again, is where people get things confused. Now, the Catholic Church here teaches that this is the Queen of Heaven. Who is the Queen of Heaven? Mary. Because they've got her anointed as a third intercessor. You can pray to God, you can pray through Jesus, or you can pray through Mary. Mary is not deity. She is not. She was a human that God chose, like he chose all the other humans, Moses, Elijah, everybody else. Hannah, I don't care male or female. They were all instruments of his, at his discretion and at his use. So we think about, Mary being the earthly mother of Jesus. They teach, well, that's who it is. It's the Queen of Heaven. Mary Baker Eddy, who was the founder of, Christian Science, said, oh, it's me. I'm the mother of heaven. Well, we've already found out that's not true. So it symbolizes Israel's who it's symbolizing. And Israel is seen as a married woman because Israel is married to God. That's his wife. And we saw that in Hosea and also in the Exodus. And so we look at this, if you remember, if we go all the way back to Joseph's dream back in Genesis 37, the son represented Jacob. If you remember, Jacob's name later would be called Israel. That's the connection to the son, clothed in son. Clothed in what? God calling forth a nation out of the people of Abraham, and Jacob was the one that he used as a name that would reflect his people's name. So we're seeing a like connection here to prophecy. Clothed with the son. She represents God's chosen nation. She's also known as Israel, my glory. So when we think about that, and we think about that son, we think about that breeding son. Isaiah 46:13 says, I will bring near my righteousness, it shall not be far off. My salvation shall not tarry, and I will place salvation in Zion, for Israel is my glory. And so that's what that's reflecting. The Son reflects God's glory. So one day Israel's going to truly recognize Christ as the Redeemer. That's going to happen during this tribulation period. That's why God allowed the tribulation period, was to bring his children back under his realm of authority and under the realm of salvation. So one day they're going to recognize Christ as the Son of Righteousness. Hebrews 1:8 says, but unto the Son he said, thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of thy kingdom. So the moon here represents Joseph's mother, which who was Joseph's mother? Well, it was Rachel. The crown of stars represents the 12 children. We've seen all this come through in these verses. So there it talks about the 12 stars. Well, who were that? That was the 12 children, the 12 tribes of Israel. Verse 1 and 12, when he talked about the 12 stars, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about those 12 tribes of Israel. He's talking about the nation that God raised up to be the mother, and of course, that mother speaks of Israel. And so that's what we're seeing. And would be the mother of Messiah. So he's doing a history lesson now and saying, all the way back from the beginning, when I first brought my nation together, I raised up Jacob. I did not choose Esau. He was the elder of the twins. I chose Jacob because I knew the kind of man he will be, and I knew that everything that Esau was, I hated. So he said, it was always the firstborn. The firstborn carried on everything. He said, not in this instance. Then, when he and Jacob got in the wrestling match, and Jacob surrendered his life and really lived the rest of his life for God and all those things, he said, no longer will you be called Jacob, but you're going to call from this period forward Israel. And that's exactly what he was called. And so now we're seeing, as he starts out this chapter 12, he's given us a history lesson in the past, connecting it to a future history that's going to unfold. And so I want you to notice here, women in the Bible normally speak of religion or religious systems. Jezebel represented false doctrine. Okay, she was the Queen Jezebel, and she was into the occult and the wickedness, all this stuff. Tried to have Elijah killed. Then the great harlot speaks of false religion, Revelation 17. We'll get to that. Then the bride of Christ represents the church. So it speaks of religion or faith or religious systems. Verse 5 tells us that the woman Israel gives birth to Christ, because Israel is the parent to Mary. And that's why you see Joseph's lineage all the way from Adam and Eve down, and you see Mary's lineage all the way from Adam and Eve down, to show that both of them come through the lineage of Judah, which is exactly where Christ would come from. So this man-child is the second person of the great tribulation being introduced here. The first person was, of course, this woman. Now, we've already introduced the great dragon. We're going to see more about that soon. But here's the second person of the great tribulation. Verse number 2, she being with child cried, travailing in birth. This speaks of Israel during the Roman Empire. And all the oppression, all the brutal murders. They come in AD 70 and they killed thousands and thousands and thousands of Jews. Went up to Masada. There was 900 and some of them that got away. I've actually been there. And ladies and gentlemen, this ridge is out by the Dead Sea, and it's huge out there. You can get up on top of that, and a charter bus looks like a speck. That's how high it is. Probably, I don't know, it's not half a mile up, but it's over a quarter mile up, and it's straight up. Herod built that great old big palace, not palace, but that great old big facility up on top of it. It's one of those big flat tops out there like you see in the desert. But it had water storage, it had food storage. He could live there for years. So if anybody tried to overthrow him, he'd go out there. Well, they had kind of like forts built all the way around their walls. Those Jews went out there and went up there. So when the Romans come out there, and you can see from Mountain Bridge up there, you can see the stones they built for forts all around. Everywhere you turn, there's forts. You can see all the way out the Dead Sea, and you see all these encampments. And there were thousands and thousands and thousands of Roman soldiers there. Well, when they tried to come up there, they'd roll rocks down. So the Romans went back into the heart of Israel, got a bunch of Jews that were still alive, brought them out there and said, roll them now. You'll kill your own people, your own kin. They actually built an earthen ramp that started way out there. And they filled, it's like this, you're talking about something like this, they filled all that in by hand. They built a ramp, and the night before, they knew the ramp was almost there. They knew the next morning they attacked. They went in, and all of them killed themselves, but one woman, I think she had 2 children, and Josephus, who was a male Jew, but who was a historical writer. That's the only ones come off that mountain that were Jewish alive. And he wrote about it. So it's called Masada. So we look at that. The Roman Empire were brutal to the Jewish people. So this is what this is reflecting here when we're talking about this travailing in birth. Speaks of Israel during the Roman occupation when Jesus was born. So if you remember, Herod and stuff was like, and Herod tried to have that child killed. It's interesting. I got into a little theological discussion the other day. How many women did Satan attack after Genesis 3, when God said he would raise up a Savior. Oh, he attacked Mary, yeah. In reality, he attacked every pregnant woman that would ever be born. Why? He didn't know who it would come from. He had no clue. We think that Satan's all-knowing. He's not. He is very limited in his knowledge. And so from that time on, Satan began to attack women because he never knew who was going to bear the child. Remember Moses and how right then Egyptian Pharaoh was having all the male children killed? If you span history, there's been all kinds of episodes where different, nations and world powers were just like Rome. And because Rome did the same thing when she was born. Every male child there in Israel was slain. Every male child under 2 years of age. He wanted to deal with it. They had escaped Egypt because God forewarned them. So on and on throughout the ages, Satan has used different terrible leaders to cause an assault come on. And so this has been ongoing, but here we see it happen in this pain to be delivered. The time when Israel was waiting for the Messiah and the redemption he was going to bring, that's what that speaks of. And many of them are still waiting. Right now, Israel's been in so many battles here since 48, and they're in it again. And so chapter 12 now connects Israel to this past event when Messiah was born. And it connects them now to their waiting for the deliverance that only he can do. And so we look at this. I heard a quote here by an old writer. He said, Israel yet never knew or recognized him as Savior, even though they've been waiting for thousands of years. Thousands of years they've been waiting on him. So notice here in verse 5 it says, called up. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. What's this talking about? It refers to Christ's ascension. We've seen, he fled away, and God caught him up, took him, he fled. We're going to see this. He's going to flee into a wilderness and what that means. So in all of this, God protected his son. All through this, God has been protecting his children and the lineage. When Israel first come back into, when the nation of the peoples of Israel first come back in 1948, not all 12 tribes were there. That's why I do not recognize 1948 as their rebirth of the nation. I don't think you can accurately say they were reborn as a nation again, because God said they will one day reunite as a nation back into their homeland. But it wasn't until 1967 war that we know through DNA and stuff that all 12 tribes now existed in Israel. So I believe that's when the prophetic calendar or clock started ticking, okay? Jesus told them before he left, he said, this generation shall not pass away till all these things come in. He wasn't talking about them. Matter of fact, it was so bad, Paul had to write some letters and say, listen, guys, I know you men, you're just sitting around the synagogue and everything because you think he's coming today, but you do have to work. Go to work. Look for him every day, but you're supposed to go on with your life. Many of them just quit. They said, we're in the church. He's coming today. He went. He said he's going to come in like manner. He'll probably be here today. I don't want to miss anything. So they stayed on. Well, families weren't being fed. And he said, no, you got to work until Jesus comes. And while you're working, share your life with the lost people you work with, all those kind of things. So they looked at it as, oh, he's coming right back. It's like, he went up there and did something, he's coming right back to get us. So for 2,000 years, real Orthodox Jews are still looking for their Messiah to come the first time. But the problem of it is he's already come, but they didn't recognize it. So now God, through the tribulation period, especially the greater half, is going to prove to them who he is. He's just resurrected two great witnesses that were Old Testament prophets. They've seen that. Because the eyes of the world through television and computers have witnessed every bit of it. So all this is going on. And so we're seeing here caught up. Then it talks about his ascension. Between verse 5 and 6 is the entire church age. So when you read verse 5 and 6, this is how quickly he's going through history in this little kind of going back and coming forward. And notice in verse 6, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, and they should feed her there 1,260 days. Did you notice something? It's saying, It said the woman and her child. No, it did not. It said the woman fled. Why? Because her child is at the right hand of God. This is talking about Israel, the nation. Okay? So Israel, the nation, represented by being a woman, and because that's, of course, God's wife, they flee into the wilderness. Why? Because when those two prophets that were killed, and they sent presents to each other, lost people, Antichrist, they made it a Christmas celebration, wouldn't bury them, let them lay in the streets, had cameras on for 3.5 days. The whole world of lost people was celebrating that these two men had killed and brought all this evil upon them because they were preaching righteousness and preaching that they were going to hell because they didn't trust Christ. And they were reprobate. All of a sudden, God raises them up. The cameras refocus. They're alive again. The cameras panned, and we'll watch them all the way into glory, all the way through those clouds, just like Jesus. Everything Antichrist has taught them is bogus. And in that moment, they're going to know in reality, he is not God. He's in the temple already and saying, I am God. And in that moment, but what that's going to do is infuriate Antichrist and the devil. Okay? We're going to see why as we go. So in verse number 6, she flees to the wilderness. Okay, Israel flees the wilderness during this great tribulation, and during this time, Antichrist has gained world power. He is in charge of the world. And so he has just slain the two witnesses. Like I said, they rose up and went back in. Now he's going to focus all of his evilness, all of his wrath, all of his vengeance on a one select group of people. Israel. If you can't look around you with all this anti-Semitism right now all over the world, including America, and see the birth pains of that already, it is unbelievable. I don't care what another nation does to them. It's always Israel's fault. Lebanon bombed them. Lebanon come across the borders because they had those red heifers, and they said, we don't want you to slay those red heifers because that would start the rebuilding of the temple. Well, the Dome of the Rock sits where the temple's supposed to be, and they thought, there's going to be a war, you're going to tear the temple down. That's their second most holy site in the world. So they went in there on October 7th, a couple of years ago, and they just slaughtered about 1,300 people, captured a whole bunch of other people. So this war of aggression has always been going on, and God said it would. Well, during this time, it's going to unfold and multiply probably 1,000 times over, because now Antichrist is going to use his power as the world leader, and he's just going to turn everybody's focus on Israel, and so he's going to pour out his wrath on them, and it causes Israel to flee. Now remember, we said the other day that there were 7,000 there in Jerusalem killed, and it said it was the 10th part. Well, 10th part means there had to be about 70,000. Right now there's almost 1.2 million living in Jerusalem. And so that means by this time there's about 70,000 left. That's a lot of dead Jews already, okay? 10,000 more of them are going to be gone, okay? And so when we're looking at all that, this remnant, which is really what's called, are going to flee, okay? Probably some, you ever heard of Petra? It is the walled city down the south of Jordan, down at the bottom of the Dead Sea. And if you're looking at a map, it's over to the right. It's where the Moabites are at and different people like that. It's where some of Esau's family. But centuries ago, some people went down there and carved a city into solid rock. It's got the face like of a big building, like with pillars and all that, but the rest of it's just red cut rock. And it goes to them. And what they did was they made almost a tourist city down there. Some people think the way that the canyon of Petra is cut, Moses, when he was bringing the children back over into Israel, to Promised Land, stopped right along there. He struck the rock and water come out. Some people believe because it's a gorge, some places the widest part is 4 feet wide. You can't drive a tank up through there or even a Jeep. You can drive a horse or a mule, but you can't drive anything. So it was a walled city. They would put guards up there. It was hard to go in there and invade them. So they went back in there and built a city, but they built it kind of almost a tourist destination. When you come back there, they had all kind of market items and everything. Well, the problem was, a long time after that, they had a huge earthquake and that started turning everything around. But I believe this walled city, Petra, is probably where the woman's going to flee to. Matthew 24:15-16, Jesus said, talking about, the end of the age, when you therefore see the abomination of desolation, Antichrist goes into the new built temple, and he declares himself as God. Now you come and worship me. That's what Daniel was talking about, the abomination of desolation, something very wicked, in other words. Spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. He would stand there and say, look at it. Who also readeth, let him also understand. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. So Jesus said, I'm giving you some insight. The day's going to come, a couple thousand years now. This guy, Antichrist, is going to exalt himself, God, and tell you there is no God, and tell you that I'm not God, and tell you my Father's not God. And he's going to exalt himself and say, don't come in here and lift up offerings to Jehovah God. Come in here and lift them up to me. And we're going to see in Revelation 13, if you don't, he'll kill you. Because you're going to have to take the mark of the beast. So all this is going to go on. Petra is in that southern Jordan. It literally means rock. It's about 150 miles from Jerusalem. So they're going to run. And so, this was built by the Nabateans, which was an Arab tribe. And like I said, they developed this into, a place. And it had a final population of between 10 and 30,000 inhabitants. So it was pretty big. It's called the Rose City because the stone there is almost a rose type color. And when the sun hit it, it just was beautiful. I've not been there. I've been a lot of places in Israel. I didn't get to go there until quite a ways away from where we were. But later on, the Romans took control of it during the Roman period. They ruled it for about 150 years. Then the Byzantines, that was the Eastern Roman Empire. They ruled it for a long time. About 4th century AD was when that big earthquake hit. And there were a lot of people killed. And they tried to move back in there, but Israel has a lot of earthquakes, They are like Tennessee and they're like Florida. They got a lot of cabins. Florida's number 1 there in the United States for cabins. We're number 2. So you got cabins everywhere, and all of a sudden the earth trembles because all that's moving. So you have an earthquake. And so anyway, we see this, and that valley is called the Valley of Moses. Now again, remember, many of them think that's where the water flowed through, come out of them rocks somewhere and went down through there and channeled and cut a hole in that mountainside, and that's why it's so narrow. Okay, now let's look at verse number 3 again. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, behold, a great dragon. Okay, so we think about this. Here now we see that it's clear that this is speaking of Satan. This is really the third person that we're going to look at in this. And so notice here the color red. It said a great red dragon. Red is the color of blood. And it deals with death and destruction. So when we talk about this red dragon, this is literally a dragon of death and destruction. And during this great tribulation period, that is exactly what Satan's going to be. Remember, half of humanity is already dead in the first half. So now, he would like nothing better than to wipe out the whole race. Every Jew, every Gentile, every believer, no matter what, because there's going to be a lot of believers, Jew and Gentile, during the tribulation period. So when we look at all this, and we're seeing kind of what's going on here, Johnson describes him, this is an old writer, he said that the dragon speaks symbolically, suggests his fierce power and his murderous nature. He has tremendous power. It's a fierce power. It's driven by anger and wrath, and he has a murderous nature, and I agree with that. Dragon appears 10 times in the book of Revelation. Tymbal is a symbol of order. It's the symbol of testing. It's the symbol of trial. So look at this when we see how it describes him. Having horns, 10 horns. Horns always in the Bible reflected power because rams had horns, the horns of power. There's one on the altar, it had 4 horns on it. God designed in the tabernacle, they would have 4 horns. What was that? it was reflective of his power. So God is a God of power. Now we're seeing the dragon come up, and he's going to unleash tremendous, hellish, devilish power against Israel. So without question here, the great red dragon here will bring great testing and trial to our world. He represents Satan as his evil representative upon this world. Antichrist does, and this great dragon does. Notice in Revelation 12:9, along with Revelation 20, verse 2, I won't read those, you can. I'll look at verse 9, you can catch the other one. Look at verse 9. And the great dragon was cast out, and the old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceived the whole world, he was cast into the earth, and the angels were cast out with him. This was talking about, here Satan is going to be cast out of heaven and all those things. But I want you to notice here in these, we see this dragon and this serpent, and he's talking about the same one. It's just different names. And what they're doing, the reason he gives you different names is different sides of his personality. The great dragon, all this fierceness, and we're going to see what each of these names mean. So we're going to see that the dragon basically wages war against the woman, Israel. When I think about all this, I think about Satan and how all of humanity, since the first two human beings on earth, he's tried everything, folks, within his power to corrupt humanity. And I'll tell you something, if you look around the world right now, he's done a very good job. I believe we're seeing, I've studied a lot of demonism. I'm going to be preaching on this, hopefully in the future, on the occult. It's kind of my old trademark, but I've done a lot of study on it, done a lot of teaching on it. But demonism, I think, is beyond the scale as we've never known. I don't think there was near as much demonic activity when Jesus walked this earth. And if you remember, almost every village he went into, he found someone demon possessed. What does that say for our world today? There are people doing things that's inhuman. Like maybe the dragon's behind it, Satan, the prince of darkness, all these things. So the dragon's going to wage war against Israel, And so he's tried to corrupt the world. It failed with Noah. Satan again tried to kill Christ through Herod, and it failed because he was taken out of the land through God's leadership. Over and over and over. Now look at verse number 3, having 7 heads. Heads here, really in the Greek translation, means the sense of seizing. So when we look at this, he's going to seize power. Now, do I believe in Antichrist's life right now? I believe he's in power right now. I don't think there's any question about it. I'm not thinking, he's going to be born soon. No, I'm wondering, is he actually ruling nation yet? And I think so. Because I believe Jesus is coming any time, and he would have to be in that place for that to happen. Not that Jesus has to wait on him, but in the time period he has to move swiftly. In those 10 horns representing the old Roman Empire, the 10 primary country states that lead the world and will be leading it during the tribulation period, I have no doubt. Antichrist is going to come up and take power of one of them. Then he's going to gain the power of 3 more. Now, I've been telling my church for a long time, watch President Erdogan in Turkey. If you notice, we just had a worldwide NATO conference over in Turkey, and Erdogan's there. And right now, he is becoming the main symbol of Islam. He is NATO. He is not Arab, but he is Islamic, okay? But he comes out of the descendants of Esau, which was the brother of Jacob, who was a Jew. So when Turkey's always, and if you remember the Ottoman Empire, which is the oldest empire we have, the longest is what I mean by oldest, it was older than the Roman Empire. They maybe almost 200 years longer they reigned. But they had all of that land over there with them. Almost everything around the Mediterranean Sea. They owned it all. Caucasus Mountains, part of what is even now Russia. They owned all of it. They ruled all of it. When he became president, he said, I want the Ottoman Empire back. That means he has to take half of Greece. He has to take almost all of Syria. He has to take part of Afghanistan and probably get part of Iran. Well, that's a heavy lift. But now with Iran, who's been the main vocal, voice of Islam since the mid-80s, Netanyahu just said here, he said, Turkey now, as he feel like, is our biggest enemy. Because he wants to be the leader of the Islamic Empire. He would be, I think, a very good possibility of the man be Antichrist. He has bases in Libya. He has bases in most of the Arab countries around there. He has bases in Qatar. He has bases all over the place. We have bases all over the place. But how many foreign countries do you know have bases like us? But he's way out on the west coast of Africa. He's on the east coast of Africa. He's all around the states there in the middle part, what we call Asia Minor. So he's a mover and a shaker. And so I think that's a possibility. The 7 crowns here represent 7 royal crowns. Rome was known as a city set on 7 hills. So again, we're going back in history some. He's setting the stage. What he's doing is he is setting the stage for you to understand this war with Antichrist and how Satan is driving it on. So 7 hills, that's what it talks about. 7, number of completion and perfection. Now, this may be talking about the completeness here of Satan's power, because now he has a figurehead that he's got ruling the world. Well, it's him ruling through it. This dragon or Satan is actually ruling through the Antichrist, okay? This is the second person we find in the Bible that will be possessed by Satan. Satan is one entity. He can't be over here. I told people a long time when I was teaching up there in Dom's, I said, well, the devil made me do it. And I said, you're not important enough for the devil to make you do anything. But there was one that was. And that was a guy that betrayed Jesus. Because the Bible said that Satan came into him. He possessed him. The only other person that we see that he's ever going to possess, ever has possessed, is Antichrist. And it says that he will come in to Antichrist and possess him. So Satan literally uses that body to work through. So it's not really Antichrist doing the things he's doing. He's just kind of like, people with a dummy and they're sitting there speaking, but it's not the dummy speaking to them, they're just moving them out. So we look at all these things. Turkey's rising in prominence in the Middle East. I still say keep your eyes on him. These 10 horns, like I said, represent power. Now we see the 10 and the 7. 7 Gentile governments represent Assyria, which overtook the northern kingdom. Egypt, which was a world power when, Joseph and all of his ancestry, or all of his kinfolk went down to Babylon, which overthrew Judah. And then we had the Mede-Persian Empire, the Persian Iran, which is what it's called today. Greece, the Greek Empire. We had the Roman Empire, and now this one's going to be Antichrist. So those 7 horns. And so, now, let's get something real quick. I want to get this before we go. Verse 7 and 8. Did you know there's going to be another war in heaven? In heaven. There's already been one. When Lucifer, Satan, Lucifer as he was called, it was known as angel of God, tried to overthrow God. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. And the dragon fought and his angels. Well, how many there are? It's going to tell you here in just a second. And prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. In verse number 9, the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent called the devil and Satan, there's all those names, which deceives the whole world. He was cast out into the earth. Jesus said in the Gospel of Matthew, I think it's Matthew, I beheld Satan fall from heaven. He was cast out of heaven. He was thrown out like a lightning bolt. Where did he go to? This earth. That's what he's saying in this. So again, another little history lesson here. So he says he was cast out to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. If you go on down, you're going to find out that his tail, in other words, his influence, caused 1/3 of all God's angels that he created to side with him. I figure that's probably billions of demons, at the least. So there's going to be a war in heaven. When does this happen? Toward the end of the age, in the middle of the tribulation period. Right here in the middle, chapter 12, 13, and 14, actually started the latter part of chapter 11, There's going to be a war during this age in the middle of that tribulation period. And what's going to be the outcome of the results of this war? God is going to, let me tell you first of all, God's going to prevail, just like he always does. He's too powerful. Michael, the fourth player here now introduced in the Great Tribulation, along with his angels, are going to wage war against this dragon. And so when we're seeing this, the devil and his demons who he's talking about, notice where the war's located. It's located in heaven. Folks, we think, why is God going to make a new earth and new heaven? Because both of them are tainted with sin. Well, when did sin ever taint heaven? When Lucifer and 1/3 of the angels tried to overthrow God, and that's sin. That's where the war's always been, folks. Our battle is not here on this earth. Our battle is going on in the realm of the heavens. Because Satan is the prince and power of the air. He's the prince and power of the air. He doesn't work out of the realm of dirt. He works out of the atmosphere. We call our atmosphere around earth the first heaven. We call space the second heaven. There's a third heaven where God abides. There's going to be a war, and God is going to defeat him once for all. You say, what stirs up this war? God tells him he can't come before his throne anymore. If you go back and read the old prophets like Isaiah, you'll find that when the angels of God, the sons of God, come in before God, and Job, Satan come in with them. What does he do? He comes in there and accuses us all the time. And finally God's going to say, I've had about enough of your mouth. No more. Don't you ever step in here again. And he's going to hurl him and 1/3 of those angels, just like he's a piece of trash right out of heaven. If you want to call that a war, it's a war. But all it takes is a word and they're gone. They're done. When Jesus comes in the valley of Megiddo, the Battle of Armageddon, and there's hundreds of millions of soldiers there that are going to fight against him, he will speak, and every one of them are dead instantly. And the blood will run about that deep. That valley's 20 miles wide. If you go from the dimensions of the Y as it comes down together, it's about 200 miles long. That's a lot of blood. So he's going to speak, and this war is going to be finished. So there's a true battle, and it's always been in heaven. And I want you to know, Satan has always wanted to be equal to God. He said, I want to be like the Most High. Now, I believe in my studies that what his role was, he was musical, so I think he probably led music. But I think Satan, who was called Lucifer, was the guardian of the throne of God itself. Who better as the most trusted subordinate to God to try to overthrow you? And he did. And God cast him out of heaven once, but he allowed him to come back before him. He didn't end it there. You say, why is that? I don't have any idea, other than to allow man to be tested to make their decision if they wanted God or not. Notice here, the end result is going to be cast out of heaven, verse 8, their place. Speaking of Satan and his demons, and prevailed not, neither was their place found anymore in heaven. Their allowance, their permission, their place to stand before God along with the other angels is no more. Their place has now been uprooted. They will be banished from heaven forever. Okay, let's stop right there. And then we're going to have some time here, question and answer things. And anything that I don't know, what I do is I lean on Jennifer and she tells you. Okay, all of you out in the internet land, thank you for tuning in tonight. Please share. We're not trying to get anything out of this other than sharing the Word of God and helping people to understand the Scripture. And it's also not only on our Facebook site. If you go out to SutherlandCommunityChurch.com, you can get all of our lessons there from the very start. If you need to catch up, if you missed one, you know, they're out there. And our site just holds them for about a month on Facebook, so you can get it if you missed tonight. But you can go to that on it's on YouTube, is what it's on. But if you go to that, SutherlandCommunityChurch.com, you can get us. Thank you for tuning in. God bless you. Okay. Let me fall off the stage as I normally do. You ladies are visiting. I normally fall off stage because my leg goes to sleep.